All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Paranormal Planet. This is the official channel of the Paranormal Intelligence Agency. And we appreciate you coming back this evening for another information, intelligence briefing, whatever you want to call it. Come by and see the paraintelagency.com website. You will find research on there on any number of paranormal topics that you won't find anywhere else. And as always, we really appreciate the support that we get out there from you guys. So first things first, please hit the subscribe, like button, and share us somewhere on the web so that we can share more and more of this information out there to the people. After all, that's really what being a paranormal investigator is all about. And, the U.S. government itself and its secret program has now proven that paranormal phenomenon, according to the report that they supplied to the Senate House Intelligence Committee, stated that UFOs were a hazard to human health. That's actually their own words. And so really, all of this information pertains to the safety of just the public. Paranormal phenomenon does and is something that can harm humans quite easily. And this is yet another one of those phenomenon. So it's been crazy here. I've been, of course, in the midst of relocating, as many of you know, going about 1,000 miles straight south of my current location. And this is going to, not only am I just moving home after 30 years of being out and about exploring, which I'm super excited about, but this area that I grew up in as a child, since I was a child even, has had profound amounts of Sasquatch activity, and I'm being given access to an area that will serve as a kind of ongoing permanent laboratory, which is something any cryptozoologist, of course, dreams about. So I'm lucky in that respect. It is frigid cold up here. It's another reason I'm excited. South Dakota yesterday was -9 without the wind chill. So you can, see how brutal the winters can get up here. And I'm often amazed that the indigenous people on these northern plains were able to sustain themselves throughout the winter. Just the cold alone seems like it would be almost impossible. So that's always been something that has fascinated me. Having lived up here and been in this kind of just unbelievable kind of cold. Looks like we are on the precipice of what might be World War III. And this will be a relatively short show just because of that. And because the packing continues, and I hate packing. I know all of you do too. If anyone's moved from one state to another, it is a nightmare to undertake, and I've done it numerous times. And this is planned to be the final relocation, so I am excited about that. So it's interesting. Tonight's topic is something, of course, anybody who pursues paranormal studies, ufology, is a fan of those things or investigates those things, know about the phenomenon of the men in black. And well, I'm not even sure how many weeks ago, but quite a few weeks ago, I did an episode on reptilian aliens. Also, you will find a video on this channel titled Reptilian Aliens, What You Need to Know. And in that, I present information and evidence that was gleaned or accrued by the farsight.org group of remote viewers who are considered to be the finest in the world, and some of their findings regarding reptilian aliens. That's important to tonight because it shows us their findings, their experiments, and remote viewings from numerous remote viewers, blind targeting, all describing the same thing, which was a operational reptilian alien base in the continental United States, and that at that location were men in black. They were above and below in the facility, and they were performing functions with the reptilians. Also, one of them testified that he could see one of the reptilians phase shifting in and out from looking like one of the men in black to looking reptilian. And again, they described an area where some people were being taken to. They had a way of altering their appearance, erasing their memories completely, and sending them back out into the world to perform some unknown function. That was also quite interesting to me. But their evidence was such that for me at this particular time, I think it's pretty conclusive that the men in black have a reptilian alien connection. Now, there's been some information that's come out over a series of years that kind of points to the idea, or really does point to the idea, that the real men in black may not be from one of the United States alphabet agencies. And that comes from some memos that were, these were penned in the 1950s at a time when this phenomenon was really peaking. And the people that were writing these memos obviously didn't know that in 2022, there would be people talking about those memos, of them discussing the phenomenon of the men in black. Had they known that, we might suspect that this was somehow planted as some sort of counterintelligence, and then plan to leak it out so that Soviet spies would find it, etc. But these were people that never expected this correspondence to make the light of day. And because of that, for an investigator, that adds a lot of weight to its credence and its overall value. So the first recorded sighting of the men in black actually occurred in 1924, and this happened to a gentleman that had seen an airplane crash. And it was strange, and this is one of those encounters that I often talk about because of it being one of the source encounters. And in investigations, the closer you get to the source of some information, like a phenomenon like the men in black, like the very first sighting, which occurs in 1924 to this gentleman, will potentially hold more valuable information than any of the other reports that come after that. And that's because you're getting pure, unadulterated, unfiltered information from somebody that has the first engagement with that phenomenon. And in this case, this gentleman had seen or witnessed an airplane crash, and he later that day was approached by men in black suits fitting the description, high cheekbones, large eyes, who questioned him about what he saw, and then made sure that he knew that the plane crash was not the result of a crime of any kind. How odd, right? To go over and convince an eyewitness that it couldn't have been a crime that caused it. Just very odd. And that kind of falls into line with a whole host of very odd behavior by the Men in Black going all the way back to this original case. In one of these encounters, a gentleman who had witnessed a UFO had a Man in Black visit him. They claim to be, more often than not, officers from the Air Force intelligence coming to talk to them. And in this particular case, the eyewitness reported that towards the end of the conversation, and he had invited this gentleman into his living room, this Man in Black started to sound like a robot that was powering down. Like it was, his speech got elongated and he started to move slower. And all of a sudden he made the statement that he needed to go rest. And he made these kind of robotic movements out of the house. Totally bizarre. In a lot of the cases, it seems like they're just slightly off. In other words, like, for instance, the intelligence behind them seems to get the overall kind of aspects of our society, but misses the nuances of it. And what I mean by that is that there's a number of encounters with Men in Black who are driving cars that look brand new, rolled off the assembly line, but are clearly a couple of decades old. And it's like they understand that people wear suits and they drive cars, but the nuance of how old something is and something new to a human looking at it is something like they miss that. You know, you see what I mean? Even their suits sometimes seem out of date or out of place, from another time in history. And that's not I don't believe, a ploy to draw attention from the eyewitness to these things. I think it's just an alien intelligence that doesn't quite get those human nuances like we do. And it's very, very interesting to me. So let's take a look here. I've got a few notes that I'm going to go over with you guys. So, Men in Black, they're often described with bulging eyes, extremely pale. They are often described as being extremely tall. Many people in this field, or who have followed these subjects for a while, I should say, know a lot of this material. A lot of people believe that they could be possibly alien hybrids. I'm not sure about that or not. But it's interesting because in my research, I came across some interesting stuff that came out with the Freedom of Information Act. And some of it is secret U.S. military documents that confirm that secret investigations occurred in the 1950s and beyond on the Men in Black. In February of 1967, Jonathan Keel, the author of the Mothman Prophecies, had an encounter with a Air Force colonel named George P. Freeman. And if you'll recall, in the Mothman Prophecies, the book, not the movie, Keel makes a careful note of the fact that the most profound thing that was occurring in Point Pleasant, West Virginia at the time was the UFO activity that accompanied the Mothman sightings. And if you read the book, you'll see how pertinent that was. And it's in Point Pleasant that some photographs were taken of the men in black who showed up there. Well, he ends up having a conversation in 1967 with Colonel Freeman. And Colonel Freeman, Keel took careful note of what he told him. And he says, or the colonel told him, mysterious men dressed in Air Force uniforms or bearing impressive credentials from government agencies have been silencing UFO witnesses. We have checked a number of these cases, and these men are not connected to the Air Force in any way. We haven't been able to find out anything about these men by posing as Air Force officers and government agents. They are committing a federal offense. We would sure like to catch one. Unfortunately, the trail is always too cold by the time we hear about these cases, but we are still trying. That is a fascinating statement. So is it still buffering? Some people were saying they were having some kind of problem with stuff buffering. I don't know. If so, it's something to do with StreamYard right now. So that's interesting. And I'm going to bring up a picture here of what might be the only true modern day photograph of two men in black. And the case surrounding this is pretty interesting. Let me see if I can find exactly where this picture is. The case surrounding these men in black, in this photograph that I will pull up here for you guys, is that the gentleman who these guys came to see had reported the sighting of a black triangular craft. And the next day, these guys showed up to the hotel that he worked at, and they asked to see him. And this photograph was captured on the hotel security cameras. You can see the identical suits, the strange 1950s, brimmed hats, the trench coat, textbook. The people that he wasn't actually at work that day, but his coworkers said that these guys looked like twins. They look like clones. So I found that very interesting, and you might be looking at the only real photograph of the men in black. Too bad it wasn't a higher resolution. It looks like it was just old equipment that was occurring at the time. So he states that they're trying to capture one of these things, right? One of these guys. And a month later, in March of 1967, Lieutenant General Hewitt T. Wells of the United States Air Force penned the following memo. It was widely circulated within the military at that time. And this is the one of the memos I'm talking about. Lieutenant Wells would never have suspected in March 1st, 1967, that we would be sitting here talking about the memo that he wrote. And he states, quote, information not verifiable has reached HQ USAF that persons claiming to represent the Air Force or other defense establishments have contacted citizens who have sighted unidentified flying objects. In one reported case, an individual in civilian clothes who represented himself as a member of NORAD demanded and received photos belonging to a private citizen. The document continues, his memo continues. In another, a person in Air Force uniform approached local police and other citizens who had sighted a UFO, assembled them in a schoolroom, told them that they did not see what they thought they saw, and that they should not talk to anyone about the sighting. All military and civilian personnel, and particularly information officers and UFO investigating officers who hear of such reports, should immediately notify their local OSI office. And OSI is the Office of Special Investigations, and those are the guys pretty much you never want to see, ever. You never want to meet an OSI officer, because if you do, you did something wrong. So clearly, they did not understand the Men in Black phenomenon. There is another FBI document, and this one is dated from January 22nd, 1959, and it was penned by J. Edgar Hoover himself. And he instructed the Chicago office of the FBI, and quote from the memo, "The Bureau desires to obtain a copy of the book written by Gray Barker entitled They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. Records demonstrate that behind closed doors and after reading Barker's book, the FBI was baffled in the 50s as the Air Force almost was a decade later." So what we're looking at here is, really solid evidence, if you will, that is refuting the premise, the theory that these guys are related somehow to a U.S. government entity of some kind. It does not appear to be the case from inside memos that we now have access to from a FOIA that never existed at the time. So what we derive from that is that the findings of the Farsight group looks to be bolstered, reinforced, if you will, by these memos that came from FOIA request. Not that specifically they're from the reptilian aliens, but since they're definitely not part of the U.S. government, that definitely adds to the possibility of them being from what the farsight.org remote viewers believe that they originate from. And that leads us to kind of a funny conclusion before I close up for the evening. Yeah, you are right, MK. It happened in Niagara Falls. Yep. So he knows exactly about this incident on the live chat there. So, but well, I'll end with this funny suggestion for you guys before I let you go this evening. Knowing that there are law enforcement personnel who are actively hunting these gentlemen for, by the way, it states in the memo, the premise for hunting them down now is because it's a felony to impersonate an Air Force officer. And so now, if you encounter a man in black, you have the right and the citizen duty to make a citizen's arrest. So there you go, guys. If you've ever seen the episode of Andy Griffith where Barney makes a citizen's arrest and Goober makes the citizen's arrest, that's probably roughly what it would look like. But yeah, so if you encounter a man in black, take him down. Hold them there till the authorities get there and tell them that you believe them to be wanted by federal agents for impersonating military officers. So, all right, guys, that's it for tonight. Appreciate you showing up. Next week, I'll be exploring the possibility that the mystery of Göbekli Tepe has finally been solved, and it adds a piece to some other ancient mysteries that helps basically solve all of these ancient structures around the world and what they were being used for. So join me next week, and until then, keep your eyes to the skies, and look out for those men in black.